Hi, I'm Ardelia. My parents kicked me out and threw my suitcase onto the front lawn because I refused to give my brother the $50,000 I spent 10 years saving. But that wasn't the part that broke me. It was realizing my name had been used, my credit drained, my silence bartered like a family heirloom, while they called it love. They said I was heartless, that I tore this family apart. But if I wasn't the problem, why did they plan so carefully to erase me? Dinner at my parents' place was always quiet, but not in the peaceful, comforting way people might imagine. No laughter echoing from the kitchen, no clinking glasses to toast something worth remembering. Just the dull hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional scrape of silverware against ceramic. That night was no different. At first. I sat at the far end of the table, diagonally across from my father, Harlan, who barely glanced at me as he scrolled through his phone. My mother, Marjorie, carefully sliced her roast chicken like it was some kind of performance, lips pressed thin in practiced patience. My brother, Lloyd, sat in his usual spot, fork in hand, but hardly touched his food. He stared off at nothing, probably calculating another failed business idea in his head. I kept my mouth shut, chewing quietly, calculating how much longer I could keep up appearances. I'd been back in this house for 3 months, an arrangement I made to save money for a down payment on a house. I had nearly $50,000 tucked away after a decade of working long hours as a financial advisor. No vacations, no luxury shopping, just long nights and disciplined budgeting. And yet, every time I mentioned leaving, Mom would sigh and say something like, "But you're finally here. It's nice to have the family together again." That evening, the silence broke with the soft chime of a wine glass being set down. "You know," Marjorie said gently, not looking at me, "your brother's going through a really tough time right now." I didn't respond immediately. I'd learned that when my mother started a sentence like that, it never ended well for me. She continued, her voice sweet, almost rehearsed. "He's been trying so hard with that business. It's not easy out there. And well, you know how family sticks together, right?" There it was. The bait. I folded my napkin a little too tightly. "Is this about money?" Her eyes finally met mine. Soft, imploring. "We're not asking for much, honey. Just a little help. I mean, family means sharing." I forced a small, polite smile. "I've bought Lloyd birthday presents bigger than my own rent checks. I think I've shared plenty." Lloyd shifted in his seat, but didn't speak. My father set his phone down. "You live under this roof, Ardelia," Harlan said, voice deeper than usual. "That money of yours, let's not pretend it was built without the support of this household." I stared at him. "You didn't pay a cent of my tuition. I took night classes while working full-time. I skipped meals to save. I'm 34, Dad. That money was never this house's." Lloyd muttered. "It must be nice to always feel in control." I looked at him. "Control comes with discipline. You should try it sometime." The air thickened. My mother let out a long breath, like she'd been holding it for years. My father leaned back, crossing his arms, giving me the same look he used to give when I brought home a B instead of an A. "This isn't about the money," Marjorie said. "It's about loyalty." "No," I said, standing up. "It's always been about the money. You just dress it up in guilt and call it love." I walked away from the table, the ache behind my ribs settling in like an old friend. Upstairs, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. My budget spreadsheet stared back at me. Clean, organized. Mine. I'd built something no one else could take, but suddenly it felt like I was being punished for it. A quote came to mind, one I'd seen on a bookmark years ago. "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." Maya Angelou didn't miss. I scrolled through my accounts, double-checking logins, setting up alerts, reviewing transfers. My fingers typed automatically, muscle memory from a decade of diligence. Yet, my heart pounded like I was preparing for war. I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Then a knock on the door. Firm, too calm. When I opened it, Harlan stood there with a folded paper in his hand. He didn't smile. "I think we need to talk," he said, holding out what looked like a printed bank statement. When my father handed me that folded paper, I knew it wasn't just about numbers. When my father handed me that folded paper, I didn't open it right away. I stared at his hand, the way it hovered in the air like a dare. He didn't speak, just waited. No expression, no warmth, just expectation. Back in my room, I unfolded the page slowly, my hands already knowing this wasn't good. It was a bank statement, Lloyd's. Red numbers screamed across the top. Negative balance, bounced transactions, past due fees. Near the bottom, a handwritten note in Harlan's familiar block letters. $4,970. Make this go away. 2 days passed. I didn't mention it. I didn't need to. That paper had done its job. It was a warning shot, not a conversation starter. But Saturday morning came, and with it, the ambush. I walked into the kitchen, half expecting peace and coffee. Instead, Marjorie and Lloyd were seated at the table, waiting. My father was conveniently absent. "Honey, sit," my mother said, patting the chair beside her like we were about to plan brunch, not warfare. I remained standing. "What is this?" Lloyd leaned forward, arms on the table like he was being interviewed for a pity scholarship. "I know what you saw. I'm not gonna lie. I messed up." "Messed up?" I echoed. He exhaled hard, voice cracking just enough to sound rehearsed. "If I lose this business, I'm done, Ardelia. Like, truly done." I said nothing. "I took risks," he continued. "You? You always played it safe. College, job, spreadsheets. Me? I actually tried to build something." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean like the juice startup, the crypto phase, the failed consulting firm? Lloyd, I've lost count." He flinched, then looked at Mom like she might throw him a lifeline. She reached for my hand instead. "Sweetheart, he's your brother." "And I'm your daughter," I replied, pulling my hand away. "Or is that only true when you need something?" Lloyd's tone shifted, less pleading, more push. "You sit on 50 grand while your family falls apart. That doesn't make you smart. That makes you heartless." I felt the insult land, not because it was true, but because it was so clearly rehearsed, something he'd been saving. He stood, knocking his mug off the table. It shattered near my feet. "You have money but no heart," he snapped. "You think your savings make you better than us?" Marjorie gasped, but didn't move. She looked at the floor like the answer might be down there, avoiding my gaze. I didn't flinch. I looked him square in the eye. "No, they just make me prepared." Then I turned and left the room. The back door creaked as I stepped into the yard. The morning air was crisp, the kind that usually woke me up gently. But nothing about this day was gentle. I stood in the grass, arms crossed, watching birds hop along the fence like they knew something I didn't. Inside, I could still hear them whispering, Lloyd pacing, Marjorie probably trying to patch things up in her usual soft guilt way. I remembered a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt I'd once kept pinned to my monitor. "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." And for the first time, I wasn't giving it. I'd said no before, but never like that. Not with my whole self. Not without apology. I walked the perimeter of the yard, like I was tracing a new boundary in my head. I realized I wasn't angry. I was done. But that calm didn't last long. I paused under the patio light, staring at the sky, turning over into mid-morning blue, and I felt it deep in my gut. The storm wasn't over. This wasn't their last play. How many more mornings like this before I wasn't welcome inside at all? The answer came sooner than I thought. Faster, colder, and louder than I could have imagined. It had been 2 days since the morning in the kitchen. 2 days since Lloyd accused me of having money but no heart. I hadn't said much since then. Silence worked better than confrontation in this house. It made them nervous. And nervous people revealed more. I was back to work, or at least pretending to be. My laptop screen glowed softly as I sat on the edge of my bed. attempting to focus on quarterly financial projections for a client out of San Diego. Numbers normally calmed me, made sense. That day, though, my eyes kept drifting to my phone. Something felt wrong. It was the kind of wrong you can't explain, but your body knows before your brain catches up. A small notification pinged across the screen. Withdrawal of 5216 completed. My breath paused. I hadn't used that account in 3 days. I pulled up the app, thumb hovering above the transaction list. There it was, some corner store 2 miles from the house. I hadn't been there. Curious and uneasy, I opened the security settings, clicked into login history. I knew what I'd find before I saw it. An IP address registered to our home router. Logged in at 1:27 a.m. I set my laptop aside and walked downstairs, calm but sharp. Marjorie was at the kitchen table, her glasses low on her nose, flipping through a magazine she never read. "Mom," I said evenly, "did you use my laptop recently?" She looked up, startled. "Your laptop?" "Yes," I said, keeping my voice light. "For the Wi-Fi or something?" She blinked. "Oh, yes. Just for the Wi-Fi. It wasn't working on my phone, and She waved a hand. "I didn't think you'd mind." I tilted my head, studying her. "You needed to log into my bank account for Wi-Fi?" She went quiet. The silence between us stretched. She closed the magazine gently and stood up. "I was just worried about Lloyd." There it was. Not even an apology, just a justification. "It wasn't just a line you crossed, Mom," I said. "It was a boundary you never believed I had." She didn't argue. She just walked past me, slowly, like something in her had folded in on itself. Back in my room, the air felt thicker. I opened the old plastic filing box I kept in my closet. I'd saved nearly every financial document since college. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I'd know it when I saw it. 10 minutes in, I found it. A loan agreement, dated 2 years ago. $15,000. My name at the top. My social security number. My father's signature listed as a cosigner. And me. Apparently, I'd signed it too. Except I hadn't. I sat still for a long time, holding the paper like it might burn through my hands. I flipped through the following pages: terms, signatures, payment schedules. It was all there, and all fake. This wasn't a new game. It was a long-running play I hadn't seen because I'd been too busy being the responsible one. I was their ghost wallet, their fallback. My heart beat hard, not from panic, but from clarity. I didn't cry. I grabbed my keys, went outside, and climbed into the driver's seat of my car. I locked the doors, not because I was afraid, but because I needed silence that couldn't be interrupted. I stared ahead at the windshield, the streetlight pooling yellow over the pavement. My hands gripped the steering wheel, then let go. I leaned back against the seat, the leather cool beneath my shoulders. Oprah's voice came to me, from a quote I'd bookmarked years ago. "You become what you believe, and I'm done believing I'm the backup plan." I opened the Notes app on my phone and started typing. Proof they've used me. Bank login without consent. Unauthorized withdrawal. Loan application in my name. Credit inquiry last March that I didn't initiate. IRS letter from 2021 they swore was a mistake. The list grew faster than I expected. By the time I looked up, the street had gone still again. My phone screen glowed, full of digital evidence and quiet fury. Even a detailed list didn't prepare me for the night they made their final demand. After I found the loan document in my name and locked myself in my car to process the betrayal, the house grew quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet in that eerie way people get when they've been caught, but haven't decided how to spin it yet. The silence felt like a waiting room before a verdict. No one brought it up. No apology. No confrontation. Just extra soft footsteps in the hall and carefully avoided eye contact. The day passed like that, tense and too polite. Sunday afternoon brought the kind of sunshine that makes shadows stretch long across the living room floor. I was in my room sorting old client notes, pretending I still belonged to a life of structure. My phone buzzed with a call from Aunt Bernice. She and I never spoke often, but she always made a point to send birthday cards with Bible verses scribbled on sticky notes. I answered, expecting a half-hearted check-in. Instead, I got what felt like a script. "I know things are tense," she began, all sugar and no salt. "But your mother is worried sick." I leaned back in my chair, phone pressed to my ear. "She hasn't said anything to me." There was a pause. Then, "Ardelia, your mother gave up everything for this family. Did you know she sold her wedding ring so your father could finish school?" I closed my eyes. There it was. The narrative. Sacrifice wrapped in sentimentality. "She never told me that," I said quietly. "Well," Bernice continued, "sometimes a daughter has to pick up where her mother left off, especially when the family's hurting." I sat up straighter. "You're asking me to erase my future because my mother erased hers." "Now don't put it like that." "No, that's exactly what it is," I interrupted. "You're handing me a legacy of guilt and calling it inheritance." She went silent. "I'm not wearing that weight, Aunt Bernice. I've seen what it does to women in this family. It ends with me." After the call, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank's security settings again, just to be sure. Every step now felt like sealing a door behind me. The sun was starting to dip lower when I heard the soft knock on my bedroom door. Then, Harlan's voice. "We're all downstairs. Let's talk." It wasn't a request. I joined them in the living room. They'd arranged themselves like a panel. Harlan in his recliner, Marjorie at the edge of the couch, Lloyd on the armrest with his arms crossed like a wounded teenager. Harlan started. "This has gone too far. You've made a mess of things." I raised an eyebrow. "I've made a mess. We never expected this from you," he said, voice clipped. "You always had it easier," Lloyd chimed in, not meeting my eyes. "I was out there trying to build something. You had safety nets." I almost laughed. "You mean I worked and you gambled. Got it." Marjorie stepped in like she always did when the room got too hot. "Ardelia, if you walk away now, you're not just hurting us. You're abandoning your blood." My breath caught, not from emotion, but from the audacity of it. I scanned their faces, hoping to find even a flicker of doubt in their rehearsed expressions. Nothing. I stood still for a long second. Then maybe this blood was never mine to begin with. I turned and walked back upstairs, my heart not racing, just adjusting. Like something had clicked into its rightful place. In my room, I closed the door gently behind me. No slamming, no theatrics, just finality. I sat at my desk and began backing up everything. Bank records, scanned documents, messages. I changed my passwords, moved some funds to another account. Then I pulled a duffel from the closet and started packing a go bag. One charger, one backup drive, one folder of originals. This wasn't fear, it was preparation. A quote from Brené Brown circled in my head like a mantra. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. I wasn't disappointing anyone. I was finally choosing myself. I didn't expect what came next to arrive so fast, or to hurt in the way it did. I should have known better than to think anything in that house came without strings. When Harlan said, "Just a quick talk after dinner," I knew it wouldn't be quick. And it sure as hell wouldn't be just talk. Dinner was stiff, like we were all actors reading lines in a play we'd rehearsed too many times. Nobody said a word about what had happened. The loan in my name, the unauthorized withdrawal, or the fact that I hadn't spoken more than 5 sentences to any of them since Wednesday. After we cleared our plates, I stood to head upstairs, but Harlan's voice stopped me. "Sit down, Ardelia. This won't take long." They were already arranged in the living room, like they were waiting on a defendant. Harlan in his recliner, arms crossed, Marjorie with her usual apologetic smile, and Lloyd sprawled on the love seat like the room owed him sympathy. I stayed standing. "This is about your brother," Harlan began. "We've talked. and we've decided something needs to be done. You have until Friday to transfer $50,000 into the account we set up. If not—" He leaned forward, eyes hard. "Don't bother calling yourself a part of this family anymore." The words sat in the air like smoke. My throat didn't tighten. My eyes didn't sting. I just tilted my head and asked, "That's a deadline?" Harlan didn't blink. "It's a boundary." Marjorie reached for her tissue box, like it was a prop she rehearsed with. "Sweetheart, we can't let pride tear this family apart." Lloyd didn't speak. He just dabbed at the corners of his dry eyes, then looked away as if that was enough to prove his pain. It wasn't a request. It was extortion wrapped in Sunday politeness. Their tone was casual, like they were asking me to pick up milk on the way home, not sacrifice everything I'd built. "I've spent 10 years saying yes," I said calmly. "You got used to my silence as agreement." Lloyd scoffed under his breath, and Harlan stood. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said, turning toward the stairs. "I'm being finished." I thought that would be the end of it for the night, but at 12:23 a.m., I heard a knock on my bedroom door. "Ardelia," Marjorie whispered, "can we talk?" I opened the door halfway. She stood there in her robe, mascara smudged under her eyes. "I know this isn't fair," she began, "but please, for your father's sanity, for your brother's life." Her voice cracked just enough, but this time, it didn't pierce me. It irritated me. I was too tired for performative sorrow. "You're asking me to trade my peace for your comfort," I said. "That's not love. That's leverage." Her lips parted as if to argue, but she said nothing. I closed the door. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I rewrote my entire boundary system. Lying in bed, I typed into my notes app, "Effective immediately, I will no longer be financially or emotionally responsible for any adult in this household." I didn't send it. I saved it. For me. Michelle Obama once said, "You don't stoop to their level. You rise, and let them watch." That night, I didn't rise with rage. I rose with resolve. And just like that, the next morning, my bags were no longer in my room, but in the grass. The house was too quiet. It wasn't the kind of quiet that came from people minding their business. It was the type that swirled with intention. There was no coffee brewing, no clink of dishes, no CNN humming from the television downstairs. Just stillness. Stillness and something else. A feeling I couldn't quite name, but my stomach recognized it first. I got out of bed slowly, careful not to let the wooden floor creak too much beneath my steps. My room looked different. The air felt vacant. I scanned the space, then stopped cold. My suitcases were gone. I flung open the closet, empty. My dresser drawers had been pulled halfway open, then closed sloppily, like someone had packed in a rush, but didn't want me to notice. My toiletries were missing from the bathroom. Only a stray bobby pin sat on the edge of the sink, like it had been left to mock me. I ran barefoot down the stairs and out the front door. There they were, 3 suitcases and my duffel bag, neatly lined up at the edge of the front lawn, like someone had staged them for a Craigslist photo. The wheels of one suitcase tilted slightly on the uneven grass, but otherwise, they were perfectly aligned. Almost ceremonial. Across the street, Mr. Whitaker stood watering his plants. He saw me, nodded awkwardly, then turned his back like he'd suddenly remembered a more urgent hydrangea. On the porch, Harlan stood with his arms folded, like a sheriff at a boundary line. "You made your choice," he said without emotion. "We're making ours." Marjorie was nowhere in sight. Lloyd, of course, had evaporated. I scanned the windows. Curtains fluttered, but no faces appeared. I stared at my belongings. No tears came, not even the urge. Just a long, slow inhale, the kind you take when something irreversible has occurred, and you understand you're no longer part of the illusion. "So that's how it ends?" I said softly. Harlan didn't answer. He didn't need to. I walked to my bags and knelt down to check the zippers. One was open slightly. I tugged it fully open and found my hiking boots on top, an old sweater I hadn't worn in years. And then, something that stopped me. A photo frame. I pulled it out, brushed dust from the glass. It was from a camping trip back in 2001. I remembered the trip, or at least, I remembered how excluded I felt. The photo confirmed it. Mom, Dad, Lloyd all in the center, arms wrapped around each other, smiling for the camera. Me? Off to the side, half cut from the frame, slightly blurred, the only one not looking directly at the lens. Even then, I'd been on the edges of their world. I stared at the image for a while, then turned it over. The back had a piece of yellowed tape holding a loose flap shut. I peeled it away, opened it, and slid the photo out. I tore it. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. Like removing a splinter that had sat too long under skin. This wasn't a meltdown, it was a surgical detachment. I didn't shout, I didn't beg. I didn't ask for a second chance or pretend this was just a misunderstanding. I knew what this was. Toni Morrison once said, "You want to fly, you got to give up the stuff that weighs you down." I loaded the suitcases into my car. The duffel went in the back seat. I got behind the wheel, started the engine, and waited a moment before backing out of the driveway. No one came out. No one waved. The engine hummed beneath me like an answer. And then I drove away. Not out of rebellion, not out of grief, but out of finality. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. What I didn't know was that while I was being pushed out, they were digging into something far deeper behind my back. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in a twin bed in a too-clean Airbnb studio that smelled like lemon disinfectant and unfamiliar soap. There were no family photos, no faded rugs, no signs of a life lived here. Just a table, a lamp, and a cheap mirror that made me look more tired than I felt. And that was saying something. After I dumped my duffel on the floor, I sat cross-legged on the bed and opened my laptop. I titled a blank document, Evidence, and just stared at the screen. The cursor blinked like it was waiting for me to admit something I hadn't said out loud yet. I wasn't going back. Not for a conversation, not for closure, not for any tearful apology they hadn't even thought to offer. Instead, I began typing. I pulled up my banking app, scanned through every unauthorized login, and screenshotted each timestamp that matched our home Wi-Fi. Then, I added the forged loan agreement I found in my files, the one my father co-signed without me, using my social security number, like a family heirloom he had every right to inherit. By the time I finished, I had 27 pages of timelines, login trails, payment records, and screenshots. I called a consumer rights lawyer someone had once recommended to me on LinkedIn. Her voice was sharp, direct, unbothered. Based on what you're showing me, this could qualify as financial abuse, potentially even identity fraud. If you're willing to pursue it, we can file a claim. I was silent for a beat. I am. She paused, then said, "Good. We'll need a statement from you." I closed the call, saved the document, and sat for a long time staring at the floor. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't even angry anymore. What I felt was cold, concentrated resolve. They crossed a line I didn't even know I had drawn. Later that evening, while sipping lukewarm tea from a paper cup, I remembered something odd Lloyd once said at a family barbecue. "Technically, Ardelia's name is still on the business. That looks good on paper if we're pitching." At the time, I'd laughed. I thought it was another one of his jokes. But now, I searched California's business registry. There it was, his LLC, and under Additional Investors, in tiny gray text, Ardelia J. Mitchell. I stared at the screen. I had never signed a thing, never approved a partnership, but my name was there like a stamp of credibility he'd slapped on without consent. I dug deeper. On a business funding site, I found a PDF deck Lloyd had sent to potential investors. Slide 7. Meet our silent investor, a seasoned financial advisor with over a decade of experience in capital strategy. My LinkedIn photo was embedded at the bottom. My stomach turned. I texted one of his old startup acquaintances. We'd met twice at family functions, and once at a Christmas party where he drank too much spiked eggnog and admitted he didn't trust Lloyd's numbers. "Did he ever say I was involved?" I asked. He replied within a minute. "Yeah, said you co-signed funding, Said you vouched for him. Ardelia, he's desperate. You should be careful. That's when it clicked. He hadn't just stolen from me. He'd sold me. I wasn't a person to him. I was a reputation, a resume, a way to open doors he couldn't walk through alone. I opened a secure folder on my laptop, saved every document, screenshot, message. Then I backed up everything to an encrypted drive and locked it in the small safe I brought with me when I left the house. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being smart. Sitting on the edge of that unfamiliar bed, I whispered aloud to the empty room, "You used me, but I get to decide how the story ends." Ruth Bader Ginsburg once said, "Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you." I wasn't fighting just to win. I was fighting to make sure no one else ever had to sit in a room full of people who claimed to love her while dismantling her behind her back. I opened the website for the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office, Fraud Hotline, and I typed, "I believe I've been the victim of identity misuse and financial deception. I have evidence." I clicked send. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened when my evidence finally spoke louder than their lies. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and overbrewed coffee. I walked through the front entrance dressed in the same navy suit I used to wear when pitching high-profile financial strategies to skeptical corporate boards. Except this time, I wasn't representing a client. I was representing myself. I held a neatly organized folder in my hand. Inside were the screenshots, loan papers, business documents with my name used without consent. Facts, not feelings. They called my name, and I stepped into the courtroom. Harlan was already there. He didn't look at me. Marjorie sat beside him, clasping a tissue, even though no tears had fallen. Lloyd was absent, cowardice dressed up as distance. I took my place. The judge reviewed the evidence without commentary, eyes flicking back and forth over the paperwork. I didn't fidget. I didn't blink too often. My voice, when asked to summarize, was steady. "I'm not here to accuse them of being bad people," I said. "I'm here to state that what was done to me was illegal, and I have proof." The ruling came quickly. Identity misuse, unauthorized financial access, fraudulent business representation. A temporary restraining order was issued. Harlan's jaw tightened. Marjorie's lip trembled. I felt no joy, no victory, only space in my lungs I hadn't felt in weeks. Outside, the sun was bright, too bright for what had just happened. I stepped out without a glance back. No one followed. That evening, I returned to the Airbnb. I took off my heels, poured a glass of water, and sat on the bed. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the neighborhood Facebook group back in Fresno. A neighbor had posted a video. It was the morning they kicked me out. The footage showed my bags lined on the lawn like trash, and there was Harlan's voice, clear as day. "You're no daughter of mine." The caption read, "This is what family loyalty looks like for some folks." The comments poured in. "This is disgusting. She deserves better." I remember her from school, always quiet but smart. "They should be ashamed." My inbox lit up. High school friends, old coworkers, even my college roommate. "I always knew you were different. You didn't deserve that." "I left my family last year. Watching you gave me the courage I couldn't find alone." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I scrolled through the flood of support, screenshots piling in from people who had stood in silence like I once did, now speaking with a kind of digital courage that felt real. There was one message that stuck. A woman I didn't recognize. A profile photo of a dog and a grandchild. "You helped me leave my own family, too." I read it twice. Then I whispered to the still room, "This story isn't just mine anymore." But the next face that showed up at my door wasn't someone I ever expected to see. Saturday afternoon found me curled on the futon in my Sacramento studio, flipping half-heartedly through a paperback I'd read a dozen times before. The kind of book you keep around, not because it surprises you, but because it reminds you that predictability doesn't always equal disappointment. My phone buzzed. Live. Lloyd Mitchell speaks on family betrayal. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I set the book down and reached for my laptop instead, pulling up the live stream. The screen loaded to Lloyd sitting on his couch, trying to look humble in a Henley shirt and freshly gelled hair. A glass of water sat beside him, untouched. His expression was solemn, but the performance was loud. "Hey everyone, I didn't plan to go live today, but I need to clear some things up." The comments scrolled fast. Some familiar names, some strangers. I watched with a legal pad on my lap, jotting notes like I was back in client review meetings. He started slow, vague statements about misunderstandings, how people you love can turn on you for money, and family drama that's been blown out of proportion. Then he dropped my name, casually but with precision. My sister, Ardelia. She's been through a lot, sure, but none of this had to go public. We could have talked like adults. Like adults? I set the pen down. He rambled on about forgiveness, the media, and private matters being weaponized. He even quoted something from a leadership book, mispronounced the author's name, then smiled like he'd nailed it. And then it happened. There was a knock off screen. He froze. Give me 1 sec, folks." He stood, walked out of frame. We heard muffled voices, his tone rising, then quickly falling, and then the unmistakable rustle of handcuffs. 2 uniformed officers stepped into view, one holding paperwork, the other gently pushing Lloyd back into the frame. The chat exploded. "Wait, is this real? Is that a cop? He's getting arrested live? Bro, you done." Lloyd's face drained of color. This is a mistake. This is a misunderstanding." He kept talking even as they read him his rights. The officers didn't rush. One of them nodded toward the laptop, said, "Might want to end that stream." A moment later, the screen cut to black. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I closed the laptop and sat still. Sometimes justice wears a badge. Sometimes it wears a timestamp. Later that night, while the city hummed outside and my apartment held its usual quiet, I got a message from an old college friend. Darren, a guy who used to attend Lloyd's networking nights, back when he thought hosting poker games counted as venture building. "Hey," he wrote. "Saw what happened. Thought you should know. Lloyd used your investor title in Vegas. Claimed you backed his hotel pitch. There are receipts." He attached screenshots, emails, VIP pass confirmations, a pitch deck with my name and photo. My face, my career summary, my credentials, all used to unlock rooms I wasn't even in. He didn't just steal my money. He wore my reputation like a costume. I stared at the emails, forwarded them to my lawyer, saved the files. Then I turned off the screen. There was no need for more outrage. I'd passed that intersection. Instead, I reached for a notebook and started writing. Not a press statement, not a blog post, just a letter, not to them, to me. You protected your name, your credit, and your soul. That is worth more than being loved by those who abuse the meaning of the word. I lit a small candle beside the window, not for closure, just for space. I thought the storm had passed, but the knock I heard next reopened a door I thought I'd bolted shut. Monday morning greeted me with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. Not quiet like fear, or hollow like grief. Just stillness. Clean. Like the kind that follows after a house has been emptied out and the dust has finally settled. I walked through the front doors of the firm's office building, the same one where I'd climbed from assistant to senior analyst in 8 years. Except this time, something was different. People looked up, not in judgment, not in pity, but in recognition. The kind that's earned, not assumed. "Ardelia," Jordan from HR called, her tone softer than usual. "Mr. Redman would like to see you before your 10:30. Of course. I smoothed the sleeves of my blazer and made my way to his corner office, wondering whether this was a courtesy or a cleanup. "Close the door," he said as I stepped inside. I did. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. I sat. "You've had quite the week," he said, not unkindly. We saw the video. Read the court notice. And the post from Whitaker. He's a client of ours, by the way. I didn't flinch. You could have kept quiet, he said. Let it blow over. I've been quiet my whole life, I said. It got me erased. He nodded slowly, then smiled. We'd like to offer you a new role. Director of Financial Ethics, public-facing, internal policy too. We want you to help build safeguards, because if someone like you can get used, so can half our staff. I stared at him, unsure if I'd heard correctly. You didn't just protect yourself, he added. You raised the bar. I didn't deflect, didn't wave it off. I just nodded and said, thank you. And I meant it. Later that evening, I sat on my couch with my feet tucked under me and a bowl of leftover Thai food balanced on my knees when Shiloh's name flashed across my phone. I answered immediately. I've been waiting for this, she said without hello. You saw the arrest? I saw the comments, she replied, and the look on your father's face in that photo. Priceless. We laughed. Not cruelly, just like two women who had witnessed a page finally turn. You were right to walk away, she said. I always believed you. But seeing it? That was something else. We talked about our childhoods, about the way I used to organize holiday dinners, prep the guest lists, cook half the food, while Lloyd would show up late and get praised for bringing wine. I'm not angry anymore, I said quietly. I'm awake. That night, I journaled. Just a single line. I lost a family, but found a self I'm proud to claim. Turns out, that's not a loss. I glanced at the framed quote on my desk. No is a complete sentence. I turned off the light and sank into my pillow with a sense of finality I hadn't known I needed. And then my phone buzzed. I reached for it lazily, already halfway to sleep, but the name on the screen made my chest tighten. I hadn't heard from her in years, and I never expected her to be next. It was Wednesday afternoon when her name flashed across my phone screen. Velda. I stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering over the green button. I hadn't seen or spoken to my aunt in years. My father's sister, the one who used to braid my hair on the back porch while humming old Patsy Cline songs. She disappeared from our lives without explanation, and no one in the family ever mentioned her again, unless it was to say she was always too sensitive for her own good. But there she was, calling now. I answered. Ardelia, she said softly. Her voice was rougher than I remembered. Older, slower. I saw the video. I saw the court records. I saw you. Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, but thick with everything that had never been said. I should have spoken up, she continued. When your father started using your name to open accounts, I knew, and I didn't say anything. I was a coward. My chest tightened. She wasn't crying, but there was a tremble beneath her words, like a woman balancing on the edge of a long-delayed confession. I kept something, she added. Something from when you were little. A minute later, a photo buzzed through. It was a scan of a birthday card I had scribbled in crayon, probably when I was 6. It read, To Aunt Velda, I love you this much. The O in love had hearts inside it. There were stars on the envelope. I covered my mouth and turned away from the window. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in the war I'd been fighting. Thank you, I said, voice barely above a whisper. Not for apologizing, but for not pretending. Velda chuckled lightly. I always said you were the one who saw clearly. You just didn't know yet. We talked for nearly an hour. Not as niece and aunt, not as casualties of the same man's manipulation, but as two women finally done keeping other people's secrets. She told me about the day she left, how she couldn't stomach watching Harlan dismiss my mother like a sidekick, or watching Lloyd skate through life with no consequences. How she quietly packed her bags and never looked back. Until now. People think walking away is the hard part, she said. It's not. It's knowing no one will follow. When the call ended, I didn't feel sad. I felt anchored. I placed the printed card on my shelf next to the framed copy of my court ruling. One memory I chose to keep. One I fought to reclaim. Later that night, I opened my journal and wrote, "Closure isn't one door shutting. It's knowing I don't need to knock again." I stepped out to my small balcony with a cup of peppermint tea and watched the city move. A jogger passed below. Someone played Miles Davis on a second-floor patio, and the breeze carried the scent of blooming citrus from the trees lining the street. This was my rhythm now. It wasn't loud, but it was mine. But I still had one final thing left to do. Not for them, but for me. The pen felt heavier than it should have. I signed the papers anyway. "Congratulations!" the real estate agent said, sliding the final form into a crisp folder. "It's yours now." I gave her a polite nod, tucked the folder under my arm, and stepped into the early summer sunlight outside the Fresno office building. The heat hit me gently, familiar, dry, and honest. I didn't buy the house to move in. I bought it to rewrite the ending. The drive across town was quiet. I didn't play music. The silence felt earned. Outside the car window, the streets looked the same. Tired palm trees, cracked sidewalks, a taco stand I used to sneak off to after high school. But I wasn't the same woman who once stared out those windows, wondering when someone would finally choose her. I parked across the street from the house. It looked smaller than I remembered. The lawn, now overgrown, sloped unevenly toward the driveway. The rose bushes out front had wilted. The house carried the same beige paint and chipped shutters, but the weight it once held over me was gone. I unlocked the door. It smelled of nothing, emptied of furniture, stripped of voices. The house stood hollow, like a museum without plaques. I stepped into each room slowly. The living room, where arguments echoed behind closed mouths. The kitchen, where dinner felt like duty. The stairs I used to climb quietly to avoid being noticed. No nostalgia, just clarity. In the backyard, I knelt beside the stone path near the fence and placed a small plaque in the soil. It had arrived in the mail the week before, custom engraved on slate. It read, "Family is earned, not owed." I pressed it firmly into the earth. Then I stood, took a photo of it, not to post, not to prove anything, just to keep. Inside, I placed a set of house keys in an envelope and left them on the kitchen counter. A note beside it read, "For the next woman who needs shelter from her storm." I had already arranged for the house to be donated to a local nonprofit that provides housing for women transitioning out of abuse and financial coercion. They wouldn't know my name. I didn't want them to. Back in Sacramento that evening, I hosted a quiet dinner in my apartment. Nothing fancy. Just pasta, a bottle of red, and 3 chairs. Shiloh brought her signature lemon bars, and 2 friends I'd met at a community workshop laughed louder than they should have when someone spilled wine on the rug. No one apologized. I raised my glass mid-meal and said, "To families we build by choice." And for once, no one at the table felt the need to correct me. Later that night, I sat alone on my balcony, the city's hum washing over me like a lullaby. I thought of all the things I'd lost. Then, I thought of all the things I'd built. Some inherit legacies, some build them. Mine began when I chose myself. And for the first time in my life, home felt like a place I didn't have to earn.